Hi everybody, it's Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, stories of the supernatural. And I'm on my way to Central Florida to do a cemetery run. But on the way over there on US 27, which is a very old road here through Florida, I came across what used to be a very iconic stop on US 27, which is Gator Land. This was a place that back in the 1950s, the owners started out as a gas station, and all the tourists that stopped for gas were always asking them, where can we see the live gators? So I guess they put on their thinking cap and they said, hey, wait a minute, we can make money from this. So let me turn this around so you can take a look at this place. It's, as you can tell, it's abandoned, very much abandoned. You know, it's they were here till the 1990s. They were, as a matter of fact, during the 1960s, there was such an uptick in the hunting of gators that 3 of the gators that they had here, while the guy that would do duty at night was off, they came and they killed 3 of their gators. And as a matter of fact, in 1967 was when the alligator was put on the endangered species list. Okay, and you know, they did by the 90s, from what I understand, it just became so expensive for them to keep the gators that it wasn't worth it. You know, of course, not as many tourists would come here. And as a matter of fact, the story is that those first gators that they caught, when they got the bright idea of starting Gator Land, they caught them in that lake right back there behind the property. And as you could tell, this is the back of the building. And I mean, you could tell there's a little bit remote even now, but can you imagine back in the 50s, 60s, 70s? There was nothing out here. And these, I guess, are just like leftover pens. They also, by the way, initially they did start with the gators, but then they went on and they started to also keep a couple of exotic animals, ocelots, a couple of vultures, things like that. So it wasn't just strictly the gators that they had out here in Gator Land. You know, they expanded, and it was like one of those places that you stopped, pumped gas. Oh, this is interesting. Look at this snake. Okay, I wonder. Okay, that seems pretty recent. Okay, as you could tell, this is an old wall. I don't think it was a building. It looks just like an old wall that's back here. So absolutely fallen in on itself. Maybe they used it like a pen. Considering some of the trees in there, they look like they've been there for a while, so I doubt that this was an actual. It looks probably like they might have kept maybe some type of animals in there. Okay. Well, anyway, I can imagine when they started this place 50s, 60s into the 70s, it must have been really, really dark and lonely out here. Okay, let's see what's in here. Oh. Okay. Look at this. This is a big container, and I really don't want to go into the back of that. It looks like they just got some type of like shelves, old shelves there. Okay. I'm not that brave. I'm not going to go all the way to the back. It doesn't look like there's anything there, but as you can see, you know, there's people that come and hang out here. Probably at nighttime. And there's a bunch of egrets, I think, hanging out by the water's edge. Or are those, what are those, vultures? Egrets? I don't know. Hold on. Yeah, there's a bunch of birds. They're hanging out here. Okay, as you can tell, way back there is the roadway. Okay, let's see. I wonder if there's any gators. This is a pretty big lake. You really can't tell how big it is from, is that a gator out there? Huh, there we got one right out there. You can't, I don't know if you guys can make it out, but he's sitting out there. What in the world is that? What is that? Is that a vulture? No, I can't tell. They're pretty big. Alrighty then. Okay, I kind of broke up the party, but anyway, yeah, there's a gator sitting out there in the middle of the lake, and I'm sure there's plenty more. As a matter of fact, I better be aware of my surroundings. You know, he disappeared. He ducked out. But yeah, I could see probably back in the 50s, they probably did have a lot of gators out here. Okay, there they go. What are you guys? I'm trying to figure out what type of birds these are. They're big and black, and I think, yeah, they're vultures. Yeah, I think they're, or turkey buzzards. I'm sorry, turkey buzzards. Yeah, wow. Okay. So anyway, as you can tell, this place, very interesting. You know, I love it. You can see a lot of the trees. You can tell they've been here for quite a while. Look at some of the roots and how tall they are. That some of, and it's probably this clearing right here was part of maybe the back here is where they kept the animals. And we've got a stone slab back here that maybe at one time it held, maybe it held a cage on top of it. Let's see. Wonder what this is. Wow. Okay, yeah. I really can't tell. Maybe they had cages on here. Something like that. Over here is, yeah. As you can tell, this wall was put together. This is this is the kind of wall I would put together, which is cement blocks, cement, blocks and cement, and then just stack them together. And they've been here for a while. It's kind of fallen apart. Yeah. Yeah, this definitely, now that I'm looking at it closer, this is definitely a pen of some type. Must have kept some type of animals in here. And I'm not talking the gators. This must have been some type of enclosure for some other type of animal. You know what? It's a shame to see places like this fall apart, because from what I understand, this place was open and active for about 40 years before they were forced to close down. And you know what? If it was darker or something, or if there was less noise, I'd probably take out my mini Oculus and see if I could pick up on any weird noises. And by that, I'm talking about not only humans, I'm talking about maybe animal noises, because believe it or not, oh, look at this. This is the track of what? A dog? It's got footprints. Look at that. I don't know if you guys can see this stuff. Raccoon, maybe? You can tell I'm not much of a tracker. Okay. Like, nope. Yeah, unfortunately, way back there, we've got people have dumped a lot of tires. You know, it's a shame. But anyway. Yeah, off in that direction, we've got some type of little room. Well, it's got no roof on it. That's falling apart. Let's see. Let's see what we can find in this building. Oops. Anyway, I was saying, if there wasn't this much noise, oh crap, somebody left their sunglasses. wonder if they're going to come back for him. Oh, let's leave him here just in case somebody decides to come back for their glasses. Anyway, as you could tell, there is not much left of this place. Okay, and I don't know how safe it would even be to come back out at night if I wanted to do an Ovilus or an EVP session. I guess these were the bathrooms. Yep. No roof, just a tree root. Yeah, there's a window back there. Alright. Yep. There you go. Yep. These are the bathrooms. Probably that island over there was maybe where they had the gas pumps, where the tree, you know, the palm trees out of. You know, you could tell this is very post Art Deco-ish, but typical South Florida architecture. You know, and the reason why I'm saying that is, you know, I wasn't around the 50s, I'm not that old, but you could tell this is the type of architecture that you would see. Same kind of colors, aquamarine, the pastels. And this roof is gone. Oh, what a shame. Anyway, I hope you guys are enjoying this as much as I do, because truth be told, I love it to come across these places, you know. Into what was going on, and it's been here all along. So I hope you guys really like this. Like I said, another time and place if there was less noise from the trucks, because this sits right on US 27, which is like right behind me. If I would probably do maybe some type of EVP session, you'd be surprised what you come up with. And at the same time, I don't think this would really be a safe place to come at night unless I had a couple of bodyguards. But otherwise, but you can tell, you can feel there's something here where, you know, remember this not only you had a lot of traffic, people coming in, people coming out. Makes you wonder how many stories these owners or the people that worked here, you know, listen to. You know, you had your tourists, you know, coming in here, can I see the animals? But, you know, after 40 years, you hear so many different tales, so many different stories, human drama, newlyweds. I'm sure that, like they say, if these walls could talk, what would they say? You know, besides grunting, like, or croaking like what the alligators do and all the animals. As a matter of fact, I wonder, I bet, even though it would be basically hard to discern, I'm almost positive. You come out here at night, okay, and I'm sure that you wouldn't even need an Ovilus or an EVP. You could probably still hear some of the noises the animals here that would make, just on a residual basis. I'm positive. And there goes a turkey buzzard. Okay, guys, see you later. I'm going to be doing a cemetery run. Yes, I'm going up to Central Florida. I'm going to take care of some business up there, and then I want to do a cemetery run, and I'm going to Casadega, which is the big spiritualist camp. Which, as a matter of fact, I've been to Lilydale, where they came from in New Jersey, or New York, I'm sorry. So I will see you guys later. Take care. Hi, everybody. Okay, he just saw me tramping through the underbrush there at what used to be Gator Land. And I'm showing you now some pictures of the family that used to own for like 40-some years Everglades Gator Land. And also some pictures that were taken, I want to say like maybe 6 years ago, where some of the walls hadn't deteriorated as bad, the roof hadn't caved in on the building, and some of the pens are actually visible. And you could tell that when I walked around there, that just even in a short time, a lot of the building and the walls have collapsed more and more, even though it seems like the brush and all the trees around the actual building have been cleared away. But anyway, this, like I said in the piece, you know, this is like a was like a what they call the roadside zoos, okay, which back in the 40s and 50s and 60s were very well known throughout the United States. You know, yes, they had major zoos in the big cities, but part of the appeal of tourism, especially down here in Florida, because our weather permits it, was these roadside zoos, petting zoos, and of course, you got your tourist souvenirs and things like that. Now, it sits on US 27, okay, just south of a town by the name of South Bay, okay, and it was run by a gentleman by the name of J.C. Bowen, who was the mayor of South Bay, and his wife Mary Lou. All right, and like I said, they got the idea to have the Gator Land because so many people would stop in and they would ask to see alligators. Because at that time there were even a lot of tourists from out of Florida that were not familiar with alligators, and they went on, and in 1959 they started with alligators that they caught in that lake that's right behind the building that you saw me at. As a matter of fact, there was one there now, and eventually they got other animals such as ocelots, Codimundi, king vulture. I read about another. It was back then. A lot of the law enforcement out there was the Florida Highway Patrols, and in one part, one of the stories I read was where a patrolman inadvertently runs over what he thinks is a bobcat. He didn't run him over, but he thought the animal was dead. Puts him in his back seat, and when he goes to the station and he's gonna go show the other troopers, what happened. When they come back, they find the bobcat wide awake, looking at him from the back seat of the patrol car, and he ended up taking it, of course, to Mr. Bowen. So this is how he ended up with a lot of the animals there at Gatorland. Also, I read a lot of different stories that throughout the years, especially the big gators that they would find in Lake Okeechobee or in the runoffs, uh, everybody knew that he would take them. So this is also how he got a lot of the animals there. And believe it or not, it was in back in 1965. Poachers used a 22 caliber rifle to shoot and carry off three of his alligators. One of the nights is the night watchman. His night watchman was off duty. Now, by the way, this was the last of several times that somebody had gone in there to take the gators. That's why he ended up having to put uh, someone at night there to look after the place. And as a matter of fact, in 1967, the American alligator was the was put on the first endangered species list of 1967. Hard to believe because, especially here in Florida and South Florida, thankfully there's a resurgence of alligators, and there's even a time period where they're allowed to be hunted. Conservation is really important, but they realize that now there's so many of them that they need to keep their numbers in check. Uh, but one of the things also that did in a lot of these roadside zoos I was reading about was that they started putting rules that you had to have captive animals, certain minimum size pens, and the sanitation, the animal care. So a lot of these roadside businesses, the zoos, they just couldn't stay in business. But believe it or not, Gatorland met the requirements and they stayed in business all the way through the 70s and the 80s. Okay, but by the 90s, there weren't that many gators left, and the cost was too much. And it's just, they were competing by then with the bigger zoos that everybody went to and things like that. So, and by then, I don't guess the selling souvenirs wasn't enough to keep the doors open. So, I loved this little iconic piece of Florida history. All right. Now, in a minute, I'm going to go into what's also really interesting, which, as you could tell right behind me, is US 27. And US 27 is a roadway that has been in Florida since like 1934. Okay. And you could probably hear all of the trucks roaring behind me because it doesn't have any tolls. So a lot of truckers for many, many years have used this roadway to get from different points inside of Florida. And I'm going to go into what's a very disturbing and haunting piece of Florida history that's directly tied into US 27. Okay, as far as US 27, I wanted to go ahead and before I got on to that, because I wanted to explain that having this little roadside zoo souvenir shop was really interesting because going through some of the research I was doing, never a dull moment. For example, back in 1976, there's a couple of miles away from where this is located at, there's a prison. Okay, and back in 1976, 6 inmates dug out of what they call the Glades Institution. All right, and what happens is a trooper is coming down US 27, see somebody trying to hitchhike, which is, I guess, not that usual because out there, like I said, there's just a lot of sugarcane fields. Bottom line, when he stops to question the person, the guy takes off into the sugarcane fields. Somehow or other, he doubles back, and the owner of the Gator Land, Mr. Bowen, he sees what's happening, and he came out with his gun and he fired several warning shots over the head of the man as he's running away from the trooper. All right. Then, back in 1985, at the beginning of 1985, there's a lady by the name of Mrs. Caglionati. She goes missing. They can't find her anywhere. She's a 68-year-old woman, goes to visit her daughter, and somehow or other she just never gets home. And just so happens that this lady drives into Gator Land to pump gas in. And Mr. Bowen kind of realizes that she looks like maybe not quite, like a little bit disoriented in the sense that you know, he could tell that somehow or other she was just not really attuned to what was going on, but she goes on her way. Come to find out, he was probably one of the last persons who saw to see her, and for 3 months they couldn't find her. And finally, back in May of 1985, they found her where she had gone into a canal, and they found her inside her submerged car. All right. And of course, they were able to identify her because it had only been 3 months. Besides that being interesting, one of the things also that when you're doing this research as to all these horrible things that had happened on US 27, which by the way I travel on very frequently and I've traveled on for many years, but it's one of those things that you're never aware of, is not only accidents, but a lot of people end up going into the canals. And they've one time even found a 55-foot rig in a canal. And sometimes they have found people years later. A lot of times it's if they're cleaning the canal for some reason, they'll happen on vehicles with people still inside of them. Sometimes it's been months, a year, but I came across stories where people had been missing for 20 years. And again, see, this is one of the things that they explained is that sometimes it's so desolate out there, there no street lighting. There hasn't been historically any street lighting on US 27. It's very lonely. And so people, if they're traveling at night especially, they could go into a canal, and if nobody's there to witness it, that's they just go missing. It was incredible how many people, besides the accidents which earned it the name of Bloody 27, it's also how many people have actually lost their lives because they went into the canal and they weren't found sometimes for years. And now, just so you understand, the actual US 27, it begins in Miami in a section here called Little Havana. All right. And it ends up very close to the Georgia border, close to a small town also named Havana, Florida. Okay. Now, when it started, it was the road in which millions of post-war, World War II, tourists and migrants first ventured across the state. All right, and right now all it is just a long stretch of road spanning across miles of sugar fields. However, it was once the backbone of Florida's tourism industry. This, of course, was in place long before Disney World existed, and the odd roadside attractions were the norm, which is why Gator Land did so well. As a matter of fact, back in the very early 70s, when they decided to bring in that Disney was going to open up near Kissimmee, was when they were trying to, as a matter of fact, widen US 27, and that's when you see a lot of the actual figures of how many people were dying on US 27. And by then, law enforcement, long before then, it was being called Bloody 27 just because of it. Unfortunately, because a lot of the accidents resulted in fatalities, they were head-on collisions. There was a lot of the big rigs out there, the truckers. So if you were in a car and you had a collision with a truck, that was it. And you'll see by one of the slides, that shows a slide of a very bad accident that happened in 2015, where a mom and three of her teenage children lost their lives because, as a matter of fact, a part of a rig had become detached. They were traveling like in the pre-dawn hours, and they just didn't see. Well, first I imagine they didn't expect to have piece of the rig just in the roadway, and when they tried to avoid it, it became like a four-car horrific accident. But it's not only long ago that all these accidents happen, as it's still in effect even up to today. However, I don't want to take away from the fact that it's a very iconic road, and basically it's just going through a journey through Florida, through old Florida. Now, this, like I said, was like the backbone, especially through the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and part of what affected the decline was when they opened up Disney World in 1971. Now, one of the things, out there, in case you're not familiar with this part of Florida, sugar is king out there. And the reason I'm going to point this out is in a minute, I'm going to read you some of the stories that I had received throughout the years, and that now I'm putting two and two together as to some of the sightings of roadside apparitions that have been seen out there in this lonely part of Florida. Like I said, there's hardly any type of road lighting, and sometimes, especially if you're traveling at night or on a weekday, you could go for quite a distance and not cross paths with another vehicle, even though, like I said, there's usually a lot of trucks going back and forth. And one of the interesting things is that I'm going to give you a fact. This is back in 1990. I mean, there was a lot of figures, but they said in between 1980 and 1990, that was a long time ago, this figure's increased. All right, just a stretch. All right, which is, it's like, let's say between Dade County up to that area of South Bay, or close up to Lake Okeechobee. All right, it claimed nearly 100 lives and dozens of vehicles. Right, and what they were saying is that passing is really dangerous in the winter. A lot of the crop owners burn off the leaves of the sugarcane plants, and it also creates a smoky haze on the highway. And like I said, this area, there's just fields and fields and fields of sugarcane, because this is like a multi-billion-dollar industry out there, and a lot of the little towns that exist in this area are attached to the sugar industry. And I don't know if you remember, they don't have that show anymore. It's called The Glades. That setting was out in this area of Florida. But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and one of the stories that I personally had, this one back in the 80s. This was from a friend of mine, and I remember he was traveling one time back with his wife, and they were coming down US 27. And remember, there are alternatives a little, well, considerably east of this area, which is the Turnpike and I-95. but if you're coming in from Central Florida, this is the best way to go. And he says that they were going down the road, and he says he sees this really tall guy walking on the shoulder of the road. But he says this was in the middle of nowhere. And he says that he just pulled over because he kind of felt bad for the guy, because he says this was nowhere. He says, now that I realize it was kind of stupid of me, because it wasn't after I pulled over and I stopped that I realized I didn't see another car, like he had broken down. So he says he pulls over like ahead of the guy. In other words, he had passed the guy up, so he pulls up onto the shoulder ahead of him, and he said he gets off, and he sees this man walking up to me. He says, look, he says, you know, once I passed him and I turned around, I got out of my car and I looked at him. I was able to get a really good look at his face. He says he was really tall. He says, but he was really pale. And he says, and he was just looking at me with his, he says that he got the worst, absolute, most horrible feeling that he just got back in his car and he left. And to that day, he says, I'm almost positive that that was a ghost. And he looked solid enough when I passed by him and I pulled over to give him a ride. But he got such a horrible feeling. He says, I realized this was in the middle of nowhere. I didn't see any broken down car, and I hadn't seen a broken down car on my way up to him. And I'm going to read you some other stories that I've gotten along the way. And I'm going to omit some of the names of the little towns, because like I said, all these little towns off US 27, they're not really that big. But all of them, all these stories came in from these areas off US 27, and I'm positive that a lot of these accidents that have earned it that name of Bloody 27 have something to do with the reports that I got in. First one that I got says, I live in an old neighborhood close to US 27, and a few months ago my family was being woken up late at night by strange noises. At first someone kept ringing the doorbell every night, then something would grab and shake the iron security screen. Okay, I'm going to interrupt this real quick. And here in Florida, a lot of people have those security screens on their front doors. That's very common here. Anyway, this went on for months, and as time went by, the creepier it got. We began hearing the backyard gates open and loud sounds on the patio and all over the backyard. We found things missing and other things moved or broken. Neighbors' dogs would bark and growl relentlessly. We installed video cams and never caught anything. Once we could see the screen shaking so hard, yet nothing there. We finally talked to several neighbors near us, and each had the same experience as us. Which leads you to believe this was not something that was tied to any of the... For all you know, it could have been somebody that had lost their lives along the roadway, and they kind of missed the part where they died, and they're maybe going from house to house looking for help. All right, now here's another one. Well, there's this sugarcane field by US 27 across the road from the storage. I guess one of those storage buildings. Between the field and the road, you can sometimes see a shadow moving around out there. But there's nothing making the shadow. I drive past there often, and I have seen it many times. If you drive past there, take a good look towards the field, you might see it. It's right by the road, almost like a person walking by the roadside. And this person is asking, has there been any accidents resulting in any deaths at this location? Which there most probably is, or was. Like I said, the history of this roadway goes back so many years. We're talking at least 65 years. That there's been a number, that let's say even if you've lived there 10 years, that doesn't mean that nothing ever happened right off where you live. All right, another one. Last night at about 4:15 a.m., my boyfriend and I stopped at a roadside park off US 27 to work on our vehicle. Let me interject here real quick. If you go down US 27, it's really common. They have these little roadside parks with like maybe 3 or 4 like picnic tables, the stone ones. They're real small, but there's a couple of them along US 27. Anyway, so I stopped at a roadside park off US 27 to work on our vehicle. A fuse blew. While my boyfriend was changing the fuse, I heard a little girl's voice say, "Mom." The voice came from down by the edge of the sugarcane field. The voice was very soft and gave me chills. I didn't tell my boyfriend at first due to the fact he'd think I was crazy. As we left, I told him what I'd heard, and he said, "Are you serious? I heard it too." And he explained the same soft little girl's voice to me. Wow. Another story. When I moved up to, bleeping out the name of this little town, in October of 2011, the building next to my house was a small roadside motel that had been closed down. It was right off US 27. I went out to throw some trash and take the trash can down to the roadside, and with the motel next door not having anyone in it during the night or leaving their lights on, I looked at the window of the room closest to my house, and I could see the kitchen through a window, and I saw a boy, maybe late teens, and with short reddish or sandy blonde hair with no shirt on, walk from the living room kitchen area to the hallway. I knew no one was supposed to be in that building, so I went to check the doors and windows for any sign of forced entry and found no signs. My brother asked the neighbors within the next few days, and they said no one was staying there and that the motel also had an alarm system. And the neighbors said that they were really surprised about what I had said that I had seen. In his last one, it was up in that area, and it's like a cautionary tale. And it says, even though this could apply to any place, not necessarily just because it's off a busy highway that's called Death Alley or something like that. It says, whatever you do, don't ever pick up anything you see on the side of the road, like furniture, etc. Here's the reason why. About a year ago, it was on a Sunday afternoon, my husband and I were riding around bleep, I'm going to leave that out, with nothing better to do. On the side of the road, there in front of a house, was a TV set and a recliner chair. We needed these to finish a spare room in our house. My husband picked up the items and then put them in our truck. A few days later, we awoke at 3 a.m. to the sounds of someone talking. The TV went on by itself. My husband and I asked each other, "Did you plug the TV in?" Neither one of us could ever remember plugging in the TV. Several times in the next week, the TV was often found on, always on the same channel, and the recliner in the reclining position. We purposely left the TV unplugged and the recliner in the upright position. But if we left the house for more than an hour, then it would happen. We would return to a blaring TV that was plugged in and the chair again in the reclining position. It freaked us out. Both my husband and I started to have really bad dreams, and we pinpointed that the beginning of these dreams started the day we picked up the TV and the chair. My husband's dreams were views of seeing people suffering, riddled with horrible diseases. My dreams were of my dead relatives asking for my help. These dreams were evil, scary, and began affecting my life in big ways. I became obsessed with them, so did my husband. We loaded up the chair and TV and proceeded to dump them. Good idea. The following night, my husband and I both had our final evil dream. Strangely enough, we had similar dreams of a frail and sickly old man asking us to go to the house and tell everyone there that he is okay now. We went back to the house where we had picked up the TV and the chair and went there repeatedly over several days, but the house was vacant. The nearest neighbor was a good half-mile away. We knocked on the neighbor's door and asked them if they knew who lived there. The only thing they knew was that an old man lived there up until a few months ago, but he had died of cancer. But they didn't know if he had died in the house or not. So whatever you do, do not pick up any items from the roadside, no matter what. And I've heard same version, very similar version of that story more than once. I'm going to go ahead and probably do a different show later on about ghosts that I have found along these roadside memorials, and that's really interesting because it's I've gotten reports firsthand. I've had experiences, and I've gotten a lot of stories sent to me about that type of sighting. So anyway, guys, I hope you really like it. Please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and thanks a lot for viewing. Take care.